Hello, everyone. My name is Swarnima Sircar. I graduated from this very institution in 2015. It didn't look like this at all back then, so this is a pretty big change for me. I study at Yale-NUS College now as a mathematics major, and for the last 2 years, I've been thinking a lot about something that really bothers me: gerrymandering. It's basically a way for scheming politicians to draw district maps and win elections and cruise to victory. And it's not really fair. And I think a lot about that. And today I want to explain why that's important, why that's a thing that anyone should care about, and why you should care. So the first thing to think about is, what exactly is a democracy? I mean, you've heard it, right? By the people, for the people, of the people, that's pretty set. But basically, it's a system of governance where we, the people, get to figure out and choose what direction our country is going in. And the thing is, a democracy works only if people are engaged and involved. The problem with that is that not everyone always has the information and ability to know about every single issue that a government actually does work on. So should every single person have the ability to talk about or to vote on or make decisions on everything? Brexit? You know, maybe not. Maybe that shouldn't have been a decision that was left up to the people. Maybe the politicians who actually know about, immigration, about economics, should have taken responsibility for something like that. I mean, the problem really is that countries in general are really, really complex and difficult to run. And not every single citizen knows what they can do to be informed about every single issue, let alone take the time out of their day every single day to vote on them. And so what is the world solution for that, right? Because most countries are democracies. Our solution is that we elect representatives. We elect representatives who then go on into government and represent us, thus a representative democracy. Most democracies around the world are representative democracies. Think of Singapore, India, the United States, United Kingdom, so on and so forth. And that's how they make the democratic system work. Now, the thing is, there are a lot of things to consider when it comes to democracy. Let's look at the case of Singapore, right? There are some rules that need to be followed for anyone to get into government. One of them is that Singapore is partitioned into different districts. Every single person has one vote, which means that you can vote for exactly one candidate of one party. And these districts are the districts that you vote in, and each district follows something that's called the first-past-the-post system. What that means is that as long as a particular party has the most number of votes, it can win. So suppose we have, say, the purple party, and the green party, and the red party, and the yellow party. If the Green Party has 20% of the votes and everyone else has lesser than that, then the Green Party wins. So you end up in a situation where you have 20% of the people basically being represented in government and no one else getting any representation at all. This is particularly relevant in Singapore, which has multi-member districts called GRCs, or Group Representative Councils. What that means is if a particular party wins the most number of votes in that district, then you end up in a situation where you have all of the seats, for example, it could be 5 or even 6, won by that party. And in Singapore, the rationale for it is that they want to have minority representation in parliament, so every single GRC, Group Representative Council, has to have at least one person from a minority. But how does this actually work in practice? And why is this important, Each district has a certain number of voters. So changing the voters in each district means that you change the political priorities of that district. And so the way the district lines are drawn and which voters are in each district is really, really relevant and a really, really important question, because you can end up in a situation where people are not adequately represented. And let's see how that might work in a really, really, really simple nation that we're going to call Gridland. So this is Gridland. Gridland has 50 people. 20 of them support the red party, they're red voters, and 30 of them support the blue party, they're blue voters. So basically, they're present in a ratio of about 60% blue to 40% red. And let's say that we want 5 representatives from Gridland. That means that if we were to represent everyone sufficiently in our government, then we would need 3 blue voters and 2 red voters. Make sense so far? How would that work, right? Let's take a look. So in perfect representation, you would have exactly that. The way the district lines have been drawn is such that you have 2 completely red districts and 3 completely blue districts. That means that you're going to have 2 red representatives and 3 blue representatives. That's what we want, right? But the thing is, people aren't really organized in this way. You don't live in nice, beautiful, perfect lines. There are lots of inconsistencies in how that might work. And also, there are other ways to do this. So let's take a look. This is another situation. You still have 5 districts here, but in each district, you have 6 blue voters and 4 red voters. By the first past the post system, where winner takes all, you end up having 5 blue representatives. You have 5 blue representatives in a country that's 40% red. How is that fair, right? You have 40% of your entire population who's completely disenfranchised and then will lose interest in the government, will complain about how we don't care about these intellectuals and elites who don't care about what we think about, you know? And there's a way to do this even more unfairly. This. What are these lines even? Basically, what I've done here is to try to show you how I can make a 40% minority, the red voters, actually the majority. If you look at the lines carefully, you can see that there are 3 districts where there are 6 red voters and only 4 blue voters. You know? And that means that you're going to have 3 districts with red representatives and only 2 districts with blue representatives. So the reds, the minority of the population, are now overrepresented in government. How is that fair? And what can we do about it? So what I've done here is what I like to do when I'm feeling scheming or conniving. And basically, I've tried to do 2 things. One is packing and one is cracking. So I've packed the blue voters into 2 districts here. There are 9 blue voters in the 2 unfair blue districts. And so the people's votes are wasted in the sense that you only need 5 or 6 people to win a district, right? Because there are only 10 people in a district. With 9 people, you have at least 3 or 4 people's votes who are, those votes are just wasted. And so by wasting and packing these blue voters together, I've made sure that their vote is diluted. The second thing is cracking. What I've done is cracked blue votes across the 3 different red districts. So now I have 3 red districts with 6 voters, but only 4 blue voters. I've cracked those blue voters across those red districts. And the lines are just bizarre, right? And this whole representation is completely unfair because the population just does not reflect this. And the people are going to get angry, they're going to get disappointed in the way the government works, and they're just not going to be able to feel like they're a part of this nation or represented by this nation. What have I done here? This is gerrymandering. And gerrymandering is something that has been around for hundreds of years, right? I'm not the first person to talk about it, and I definitely won't be the last. The first example of a gerrymander was in the year 1812, when a senator, Elbridge Gerry, in the state of Massachusetts in the United States, partitioned his district in a really weird way. The editor of the Boston Gazette at the time looked at it, laughed, and said, "Whoa, this looks like a salamander." And so there was a political cartoon that was printed called Gary's Salamander. That eventually turned into gerrymander. And that was the first gerrymander, and you've seen that since in nations all around the world. Now, gerrymandering is a huge problem because it disenfranchises everyone who can vote and everyone who's part of a nation. And what can you do to prevent it, right? The thing is, it can be thought of as a mathematical problem. And this is where it gets really interesting for me, as someone really interested in that. What it basically is a problem of apportionment, a problem of just separating out people on the basis of certain criteria that you might have. The first criteria is equal population. You might want to have the same number of people in every district so that they're equally represented. That's one. The second is that you want the districts to be continuous. That makes sense, or contiguous. That just means that districts shouldn't have holes in them. It really wouldn't make sense for one voter in a particular district in Punggol to also have people in the same district in Jurong. They would have completely different concerns, their problems are different, and doing that would just be really weird and bizarre, so we won't. That's contiguity. And the third is compactness. Basically, you do not want districts that look like this. These lines are just so strange and weird. And so let's say that there's something that we want in terms of, fair lines. The districts should look nice. There's a way to define that mathematically, but I really won't go into that because there are about 36 definitions out there, and they are just not worth it. Right, so we want compactness, contiguity, and equal population, and we don't want gerrymandering. But how can you actually measure gerrymandering? I hinted at this a little while earlier. Basically, you don't want gerrymandering, and the way to identify gerrymandering is by wasted votes. As you can see in this particular diagram, I was talking about the wasted blue votes. There are also wasted red votes, and the efficiency gap is a metric that allows you to calculate this. With the efficiency gap, you can actually have a measure of how gerrymandered a place is. The higher the efficiency gap, the more indication there is of gerrymandering. And this is basically what I've been studying for the last 2 years or so. I'm writing a paper on it now. Maybe it'll come out this summer, but we'll see. Now, the thing is, these are really, really important questions, right? And we all live in a country where these issues are hugely important. Singapore, for example, there's a general election coming up right around the corner. I know that most people here, including myself, aren't exactly eligible to vote just yet. We're not old enough or we're not citizens, but it's still important to think about this. Let's take a look at the map in 2011 before the general election. Or before that, we can look at how gerrymandering has really, really increased in importance. So this is the map in 2011. As you can see, there are lots of districts. There's that one pink district over there that was the only district that was won by the opposition party, where they got a certain number of members in government. And the rest of the nation was won by the People's Action Party, which has been in power since 1965, Singapore's independence. Then we have the election map in 2015. You can see that the lines are really totally different. You still have that one GRC, Group Representative Council, that's won the opposition, but the lines themselves are still really, really different. And why does that happen? In Singapore, the elections are completely under the local election commission, and they're not required to give out reasons for redistricting. There are really valid reasons for redistricting, like reflecting a shift in population demographics, and sometimes those are reasons why they might choose to do so. But in this country, they don't have to give any reasons for that. It's very different around the world. Now, none of this matters if we don't care about it, right? The thing is, democracy only really works if people are engaged, if people are active, and if people actually go out and do something to hold people accountable and be held accountable themselves. And so what I want to leave you all with is basically the idea that we all really need to get out there and talk to our MPs. We might not be citizens, and we might not be able to vote, but that doesn't matter, because fundamental things like where you're voting or where you're located impact the policies that you're subject to. And gerrymandering is just one way that politicians disenfranchise voters, but it's up to us as voters to actually get out there and make a difference. And to do that, the first thing you need to do is care. And so I hope I've made you care a little bit about gerrymandering and our democratic process. Thank you.